My mother-in-law looked straight into the camera lens and told the photographer to erase me from her own son's wedding album. And she had no idea that the woman she just erased was about to own the company that erased her son right back. My name is Maya Bennett, and I want you to picture the exact second your entire marriage ends without a single person saying the word divorce out loud. Picture standing in a living room full of people who share your last name, watching your mother-in-law raise her hand mid-countdown, look you dead in the eye, and calmly announce to a room full of relatives that you do not belong in the picture. That happened to me on a random Saturday afternoon, and it took less than 4 seconds to undo 3 years of my life. It started as an ordinary family portrait day. Diane Wells, my mother-in-law, had her hair professionally styled just for this photo, and my father-in-law, Walter, had pulled out the navy suit he only wore for holidays. I stood at the edge of the group the way I always did, twisting the hem of my dress, already sensing where this was heading, because every single year I had been shuffled to the darkest corner of the frame, sent to fetch appetizers mid-shot, or quietly cropped out during editing. This year, Diane decided she did not even want the trouble of cropping. "Harper, move a little to the left. You are blocking our Chloe," she said first, waving me aside like I was blocking a window. I obeyed, the way I always obeyed, and the photographer started his countdown. 1, 2, and then Diane's hand shot up. She turned to me, her voice slicing clean through the room, and said the words that would replay in my head for the rest of my life. "Harper, you are not family, so you should not be in this picture. Step aside and stand over there." The room went completely silent, the kind of silence that rings in your ears. I looked at my husband, Connor, hoping he would say something, anything, but he kept his eyes locked on his phone, thumb scrolling like he had not heard a word. My sister-in-law Paige wore a small, satisfied smirk. My father-in-law let out a tired sigh and looked away. Nobody defended me. Not one person in that entire room, the room I had cooked for, cleaned for, and sacrificed 3 birthdays and every single holiday for, said a single word on my behalf. I peeled off the cardigan I had worn specifically to match everyone else that day, laid it neatly over the back of a chair, picked up my purse, and walked out the front door without raising my voice once. Nobody chased after me. By the time I reached the end of the driveway, the cold autumn wind hit my face and I realized I was already crying. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere so deep, it feels like it has been waiting 3 years for permission to finally happen. I bought a train ticket home to my parents, and within minutes my phone was buzzing nonstop with messages from Connor. "Where are you? We are done with the photos. Come back, stop being dramatic," he wrote, using the exact phrase he had used on me 100 times before, because in 3 years of marriage I had learned that stop being dramatic was Connor's favorite weapon, the one he reached for every time I dared to notice how badly his family treated me. He told me I was imagining things, that I was too sensitive, that no one else in the family had a problem with me, and slowly, piece by piece, I had started believing him instead of my own memory. The final message that broke something loose in me was a voice memo from Diane, not an apology, just a question, asking who was going to cook the pot roast for 6 people now that I had left, since it was Walter's birthday. That was the moment I finally understood my only real value to that family. Not a wife, not a daughter, just a free cook, a free maid, an unpaid assistant they occasionally allowed to sit at the edge of their photographs. I typed back one sentence. "From today on, whoever is hungry can cook. I am done playing the maid." Then I blocked every number I had for them. My parents took one look at my face and knew something was wrong before I said a single word. When I told them what Diane had said, my father slammed his fist on the coffee table hard enough to rattle the mugs, and my mother wrapped her arms around me and let me cry until there was nothing left. That night, Connor showed up at their door, demanding to take me home, calling the whole thing a tiny misunderstanding over a stupid photo. And when I reminded him it was never about one photo, it was about 3 years of being erased a little more every single year. He told me I was rewriting history, that I always exaggerated things once I got upset. I gave him one choice that night. We move out on our own, or we get a divorce. He refused, insisting his mother needed him nearby. And when I would not back down, he swept his arm across the coffee table, sending fruit and broken glass across the floor, screaming that no woman would ever want a divorced wife once he was done with me. My father threw him out of the house, and once the door slammed shut, he looked at me with a certainty I had never seen from him before and said 4 words. "Divorce him, come home." The next morning, I put on the sharp, tailored suit Diane always hated. The one she said made me look unfeminine, and walked into my office for the first time in weeks feeling like myself again. A coworker told me our division head, Nathaniel Cross, was reopening a stalled international expansion project after my supervisor tried to steal credit for work I had actually built from scratch. I walked into his office, laid out the falsified numbers with proof in hand, and by the end of that meeting, the entire project, and the career I had buried for 3 years, finally belonged to me again. Diane was not finished. She showed up at my office lobby days later, screaming that I was a shameless woman abandoning her sick husband. Drawing a crowd of coworkers until Nathaniel stepped out of the elevator, calmly introduced me as the lead manager of a multi-million-dollar expansion, and watched her face collapse in real time. Connor kept calling too, insisting I was the one destroying our family over nothing, telling me repeatedly that I would regret this, that I was throwing away a good life because I could not take a joke. I stopped answering. I filed the paperwork instead. That week I hired an attorney named Grant Whitmore, an old classmate turned divorce lawyer, who listened to 3 years of my life laid out on his desk and told me plainly that what I had survived was not a misunderstanding. It was documented financial and emotional abuse, and that I was entitled to far more than the Wells family had ever let me believe. Days later, Connor showed up at my office in a rage, grabbed my collar in front of witnesses, and was arrested on the spot, giving Grant everything he needed to secure a restraining order by that same evening. Then came the discovery that reframed every cruel comment I had endured. Grant subpoenaed medical records and found a fertility report proving Connor had been completely sterile for years, a fact his family hid from me while publicly blaming me, mocking me, forcing humiliating remedies on me for a problem that was never mine at all. Every insult about being unable to give them an heir had been a manufactured lie designed purely to control me while protecting Connor's pride. And once I understood that, the last piece of guilt I had been carrying finally burned away. Paige, of all people, began quietly feeding me evidence against her own brother. Hotel photos, warnings about ambushes, proof of the lies stacking one on top of another. When Connor and Diane staged one final scene outside my office with hired photographers and doctored pictures, the company's own CEO intervened personally, called the images fake, and had Connor arrested again for violating his restraining order in broad daylight in front of the entire building. The courtroom hearing became the loudest public reckoning of their lives. Grant laid out the assault footage. The falsified photos beside the real security footage proving my innocence, the stolen paychecks, and finally the fertility report that exposed years of engineered cruelty. Connor screamed that it was forged until the judge silenced him. And then Paige walked in, stripped of her usual polish, and testified under oath to every ounce of coordinated abuse her mother and brother had inflicted on me, including the humiliating home remedies Diane once forced down my throat. Diane collapsed in the gallery, sobbing that I had turned her own daughter against her, and Connor sat frozen, finally understanding that the wife he once erased from a photograph was the same woman about to erase every asset he had left. The judge granted the divorce immediately, awarding me the marital home, full reimbursement with interest, and a significant sum in punitive damages for fraud and cruelty. Diane and Connor tried one last press stunt on the courthouse steps, but Paige stepped in front of the cameras herself and confirmed everything publicly, and I watched years of manufactured superiority collapse into humiliation in real time, watched Connor beg me quietly in the hallway to reconsider, promising he had changed, promising it would be different, the same manipulation dressed in a new desperate tone, and for the first time those words had absolutely no power over me at all. Weeks later, my company offered me a position leading the entire international expansion overseas, a role the woman standing at the edge of that family photo could never have imagined for herself. I signed the final papers, sold the condo, and let Grant, who had become something far more than my lawyer over these months, drive me to the airport himself. Paige sent one last message, thanking me for showing her what standing up for yourself actually looked like, and I answered with nothing but gratitude, because somewhere in all that wreckage, one person from that family had finally chosen to see me. Standing at the gate before my flight, I thought about the version of myself who used to shrink herself smaller every single year just to survive one photograph. She was gone now, replaced by a woman who had rebuilt her entire life from the exact moment someone told her she did not belong, and who was finally walking toward a future no one would ever get to shrink again. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because The Revenge Tales brings you a brand new story of betrayal and justice every single week, and you will not want to miss what happens next.